final moving box had just thudded onto the dusty heart-pine floor of my great-grandfather's cabin. The sound echoed with a satisfying finality in the quiet, sun-drenched air, a sound that said, in no uncertain terms, "You are home." I straightened up, my back aching from the long drive and the sweaty work of unloading, and a slow, triumphant smile spread across my face. After years of meticulous planning, of navigating a labyrinth of estate law and Byzantine County permits, I was finally here. I had taken possession of the keys less than an hour ago. The view from the wide front porch, a sprawling, uninterrupted vista of the sparkling turquoise waters of Azure Lake, was already working its magic, soothing the frayed edges of my city-weary soul. My moment of hard-won peace was shattered by the indignant crunch of tires on my new gravel driveway. A golf cart, gleaming white and moving with the silent, predatory speed of a shark, pulled to a stop. A woman with a severe blonde bob that looked like it had been sculpted from marble, and an expression of profound, almost theatrical disapproval, got out. She was flanked by two large men in matching polo shirts, bearing the ostentatious Golden Eagle logo of the Azure Hills HOA. She was holding a large rolled-up blueprint like a royal scepter, and she marched up my new stone walkway, as if she owned it. "Good afternoon," the woman said, though her tone suggested the morning was anything but. Her eyes swept over my half-unpacked boxes with disdain. "I am Eleanor Vance, president of the Azure Hills Homeowners Association. I trust the movers will be gone by noon. We have strict rules about the duration of commercial vehicles within the community." "They're just finishing up," I said, extending a hand out of reflex, a gesture of neighborly welcome. "I'm Sam Keller, the new owner." She ignored my hand completely, her gaze fixed on the blueprint in her own. She unrolled it with a dramatic flourish, spreading it across my porch railing. It was a detailed, color-coded master plan of the entire Azure Hills development. "As you can see from the community master plan, Mr. Keller," she began, her polished, blood-red fingernail tapping a specific spot on the map. A spot where a drawing of my cabin was faintly visible beneath a thick, red proposed roadway. "Your cabin, this structure right here, is situated directly in the path of our mandated northern emergency access road. The county has made its construction a non-negotiable condition of our final development approval. You'll have 90 days to relocate the structure." I stared at her, my brain struggling to process the sheer, breathtaking insanity of her demand. The words seemed to hang in the air, nonsensical and absurd, stripped of all connection to reality. Relocate. "The structure?" I repeated, my voice a quiet whisper of disbelief. "You want me to move my house?" She offered a thin, pitying smile, the kind one might give to a child who doesn't understand why they can't have ice cream for breakfast. "It's a quaint little cabin, Mr. Keller, not a mansion. It can be moved. We have a list of approved structural relocation contractors. Of course, the expense, estimated around $80,000, will be yours. Now, we'll need your signature on the preliminary notice of compliance to begin the process." I stared at her, the triumphant feeling of a moment ago curdling into a cold, hard knot in the pit of my stomach. She wasn't just welcoming me to the neighborhood with an insane demand. She was threatening my home, my family's history, on the very day I had taken possession of it. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a formal, premeditated ultimatum. "Am a structural engineer. My entire professional life revolves around understanding how buildings stand, how they are rooted to the earth, the immense and complex interplay of physics, materials, and foundations. The idea of relocating my great-grandfather's cabana, 70-year-old structure built with a solid, 2-foot-thick stone foundation and heavy hand-hewn timber framing, was not just expensive. It was a ludicrous, destructive fantasy, born of pure, unadulterated entitlement and a profound ignorance of the physical world. But more than that, I had done my due diligence. For the better part of a year, while this property was in escrow, as I settled my family's estate, I had made the county planning and zoning office my second home. I had studied every document, every permit, every geological survey related to the Azure Hills development. I knew their master plan, their permits, and their problems better than they did themselves. my cabin. A beautiful example of mid-century rustic architecture, sat on a 5-acre holdout parcel that my family had stubbornly refused to sell to the developers. It was a sovereign island of history in a sea of new, characterless construction. I knew from my research that the county had indeed mandated that the HOA build a secondary emergency access road for fire and ambulance services as a condition of their permit. I also knew, from reading the fine print of their public filings and the minutes of their zoning hearings, that the proposed route cut directly through my private property. And in those same documents, the developer had listed this critical issue as an unresolved land acquisition and easement issue. Eleanor Vance hadn't just inherited a development. She had inherited a massive ticking time bomb of a planning failure. And her solution was not to negotiate, but to attempt to bully the new owner of the old shack into submission with a ridiculous demand she had no legal power to enforce. "Ms. Vance," I said, my voice now dangerously calm, all traces of my earlier shock replaced by a cold, professional anger. "I think you are operating under a severe and legally perilous misapprehension. I have the legally recorded fee simple title to this entire 5-acre parcel. My property is not, nor has it ever been, subject to the authority or the master plan of your HOA. Her smile vanished, replaced by a mask of cold fury. She had clearly expected me to be an uninformed, easily intimidated homeowner. Expected to be contradicted with the calm certainty of a professional who knew her own business better than she did? You are mistaken. Your cabin is a public nuisance. It is an obstruction, is preventing the construction of a vital piece of safety infrastructure that will serve 200 families. If you refuse to cooperate, we will have no choice but to petition the county to have your property condemned under eminent domain for the public good." The 2 large compliance officers with her took a synchronized step forward, clear and practiced act of physical intimidation. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. This wasn't just a threat, it was a declaration of war on the very day I had moved in. They were using strong-arm tactics and baseless legal threats to try and bully me into abandoning my home. She truly believed her HOA's needs superseded my constitutional property rights. "I will not be signing anything," I said, my voice dropping, my eyes locking on Eleanor's. "I am telling you and your employees to leave my property immediately. You are trespassing. This is not over." Eleanor shrieked, her voice rising, the carefully maintained facade of the calm executive cracking completely. "You are endangering this entire community with your selfishness. You will move that cabin, or we will move it for you." I realized then that she was beyond reason. Her arrogance was a closed loop, an impenetrable fortress of self-importance. Arguing with her was pointless. So, as she continued her tirade, I took out my phone. She smirked, assuming I was going to take a picture or record her. "Go ahead, document your non-compliance. It will only help our case for condemnation." But I didn't open my camera app. I dialed 911. She was the one making threats. On my land, but I would be the one to call for help. Her smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "Yes. Hello," I said calmly and clearly into the phone, my eyes locked on hers. "I'd like to report a trespass and harassment. My name is Sam Keller. I'm at 1190 Old Lake Road. I am the new owner of this property. I have just moved in. The president of the neighboring HOA Ames, Eleanor Vance, is on my porch with 2 of her employees. She is refusing to leave, has demanded that I relocate my home, and is now threatening to have my property condemned. I'm a new resident here, and I feel unsafe and threatened." I listened for a moment, then replied, "Yes, I'll be right here. Thank you." I ended the call and looked at Eleanor, whose face was a mixture of shock and rage. I had seized the initiative. I had taken her threat and turned it back on her, casting her not as a community leader enforcing the rules, but as an unstable individual harassing a new homeowner. The sound of distant sirens began to grow, a sound she clearly believed was arriving to support her authority. She had no idea they were coming to be the official witnesses to her own spectacular, self-inflicted downfall. The county sheriff's deputy, seasoned officer named Brody, with a calm demeanor and weary eyes, arrived to find a tense standoff. Eleanor and her two compliance officers were on one side of my porch, radiating righteous indignation. I was on the other, leaning against a railing, a cup of coffee now in my hand. Eleanor immediately intercepted the deputy, launching into her preemptive, dramatic narrative, a tale of civic duty and uncooperative obstructionism. "Thank you for coming." "Officer," she began, her voice dripping with concern, "I am Eleanor Vance, the president of the Azure Hills HOA. This man," she pointed at me, "is the new owner of this cabin, and he is refusing to cooperate with a critical community safety requirement. He is illegally blocking the only feasible route for a county-mandated emergency access road, a road that is necessary for the safety of all 200 families in this development." She presented herself as the voice of public safety, the protector of the community against my selfish, reckless behavior. The deputy listened patiently, his gaze taking in the whole scene. He then walked over to me. "Sir," he began, "you've heard the complaint. Ms. Vance claims you're blocking a required emergency route that needs to be built on this land." "That's a very interesting way of phrasing it," I said, calmly. "What she means is that her development was designed so poorly that the only feasible route for a road they are legally required to build happens to cut directly through the middle of my private, pre-existing property and my 70-year-old home." I gestured to a small table on my porch where I had already laid out my file. "As an engineer, I believe in the power of documentation. Officer," I said, "I am a structural engineer. I don't buy property without doing exhaustive due diligence. I've known about this issue for months, and I am fully prepared." I laid the first document on the table. It was the officially recorded and notarized grant deed to this 5-acre property, which was transferred to my name this morning. "Is unencumbered by any public or private easements," I noted. I laid down a second document. "This is the certified county survey map of my property, showing its exact boundaries. As you can see, it is a sovereign parcel, completely independent of the Azure Hills development." Finally, I slid a third, much thicker document forward, its cover bearing the official county seal. And this, officer, is the most interesting document of all. This is the publicly filed conditional use permit for the entire Azure Hills development, which I obtained from the county planning office last week. I opened the permit to a page I had marked with a bright yellow tab. I pointed to a specific highlighted clause, the language of which I had already committed to memory. If you'll read this, section 4, subclause B, states, "Final certificate of occupancy for all phases of the Azure Hills development is contingent upon the successful construction and county approval of the Northern Emergency Access Road, as specified in the master plan." Appendix BI then flipped to another page also highlighted. In this clause here, section 9, land acquisition, states, "The developer and any subsequent homeowners association are solely responsible for the legal acquisition, through good faith negotiation and fair market purchase, of any and all private lands necessary for the completion of said infrastructure. No certificates of occupancy shall be deemed permanent until this condition is met and certified by the county." I looked the deputy directly in the eye, my voice steady and clear. "Deputy, Ms. Vance is correct that the road is mandated by the county. What she seems to have conveniently forgotten, or deliberately ignored, is that the permit requires her development to legally acquire the land for that road through good faith negotiation. Her attempt to force me, under threat, to relocate my home is not just a hostile neighborhood dispute. It is a brazen admission that her entire 200-home development is currently, and has been since the first resident moved in fundamental violation of its primary operating permit with this county. They have sold and occupied hundreds of homes without meeting the core non-negotiable conditions required for their final legal approval." The deputy's professional demeanor hardened. He was no longer a referee in a petty squabble. He was a law enforcement officer who had just been made aware of a massive community-wide permit violation and potential real estate fraud. The implications were enormous. He took a step back and got on his radio not to dispatch, but to the direct line of his supervisor, the sheriff. He explained the situation in low-clipped tones. I could hear the sheriff's tinny voice on the other end asking pointed questions. After a few minutes, the deputy hung up, looked at me, then at Eleanor, whose confident smirk had been replaced by a look of dawning horror. "The sheriff is on his way," the deputy said, "along with Mr. Henderson, the head of the county planning and zoning department." The consequences were swift and catastrophic for the HOA. When the sheriff and the county commissioner arrived, I calmly walked them through the same documents. The commissioner, a man not known for his patience with developers who cut corners, was furious. The eviction notices from the title of my story were it not for me. They were for them. That very afternoon, a county compliance officer, accompanied by 2 deputies, arrived at the grandstone entrance of Azure Hills. He posted official, bright red notices of permit violation on the HOA's community entrance and on the door of their clubhouse. The notices, citing the specific clauses I had shown the deputy, stated that the entire Azure Hills development was in breach of its conditional use permit. The notice declared that all existing certificates of occupancy were suspended, effective immediately, pending a full compliance review. Residents were informed that they had 30 days to prove the development had met the conditions of its permit, namely, by legally securing the land for the emergency road, or they would be required to vacate their homes until the issue was resolved. It was a functional, community-wide eviction notice. The community descended into absolute chaos. The residents, who had been blissfully unaware of the shaky legal ground their multi-million-dollar homes were built on, turned their fury on Eleanor Vance, the woman whose arrogance and catastrophic failure to perform basic due diligence had jeopardized their single biggest investments. She was immediately and unceremoniously removed as president in a brutal emergency board meeting that I was told lasted until 3 a.m. A new, humbled HOA committee approached me a week later. They did not demand. They begged. They asked to begin a good faith negotiation to purchase a small, 50-foot wide easement across the far, unused edge of my property for the road. Months later, I sat on my cabin porch, watching the sunset paint the lake with fire. In the distance, the new legally acquired and fully paid for emergency access road, which the county had officially named Keller Way in a fit of bureaucratic irony, was being paved. Its path had been carefully chosen to preserve my largest oak trees. The HOA had paid a significant premium for the easement, and as a sign of goodwill, it also paid to have my great-grandfather's cabin officially designated as a county historical landmark, protecting it forever from any future development plans. I had my peace. My home was secure. And I had taught an entire community of powerful people that some things, like a family legacy, the rule of law, and a well-built 70-year-old cabin are truly and beautifully immovable objects.